Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I would just like to say a few things to the whole committee here concerning the bill. I'm concerned that the bill has not really fully addressed. I know we've had a lot of conversations about the IDD community and nursing homes and the number of folks that maybe will be ineligible for state benefits should this minimum wage go into effect. But I feel like this is a working document that's not finished. It's like an incomplete in college. And it's hard for us, or I think, to vote on something that's incomplete when we don't have the full breadth of how this will affect our economy is something that should not be done. When we look at other states that have increased their minimum wage, they have thriving economies. They do not have this impotent economy that we have here in the state of Connecticut when they do that. And I just would like to point out that Seattle gradually raised their minimum rate to $15 an hour. And there was a study done on what that impacts were by the University of Washington and Texas A&M, and you can go look it up. And I just want to list you what it found, and it's interesting. It found that the cost to the low wage earner outweighed the benefit 3 to 1. It reduced the number of jobs, and sometimes drastically, depending on the industry. The nature of the job and the responsibility of the job at that higher rate changed because employers expected the person to work harder or different because they had increased it. The workforce or the workplace environment changed because many of the employers reduced the number of hours, and the type of individual that they ended up hiring changed because they were demanding a higher wage. So those that were in the bracket of 16 to 21 were the ones that were impacted the most, the low wage earner. And it didn't necessarily decrease jobs per se, but it completely slowed hiring of new positions. So I think that's something that we need to keep in consideration. And the Journal of Human Resources found that those states that had incremental increases in the minimum wage in 2017 to present, the cost was 389,000 jobs. So I think that's something that we need to think about. And I want to talk about the tip credit because I put myself through college working as a waitress and a bartender. I would like to say that we're talking about the increase in the minimum fair wage. I would much rather us having the conversation about the maximum wage that we can help our Connecticut residents earn. The minimum wage was designed as the entree into the market, as you all know. But if you work in a restaurant, and if restaurants that I have in my district, the #1 tourist destination in Connecticut, we have all heard from restaurants, but these in particular are thriving. They will close 2 of the largest restaurants in Mystic because they can't afford this. And I think that's an impact. I've heard from nursing homes, daycare centers, restaurants, our oyster hatchery, farms, that this is something they cannot absorb. So I think it's illegitimate for anybody on this committee who is not an employer to say businesses can afford it. If you're not an employer, you don't have the right to say that. And I think we need to focus on other employers rather than the state of Connecticut being the only employer. So I'd like to just have people keep in mind that people that work in restaurants, many of them are single women. The 2 that I'm talking about in Mystic, 90% of the people working there that are earning these tips are women. They're single, they have children. In this type of industry, they don't have a college education in many cases. It affords them the flexibility that they need, and they're making upwards of $30 an hour with their tips. They can work from 4 to 10 and come home with $300 cash. So I think we have to be very careful when we think about what we're going to do for the restaurant industry as a whole, and think about how this is going to impact tourism, and think about what the horizontal effects are when you increase the minimum wage. Maybe you do it when your economy is thriving. That is certainly not the case here in the state of Connecticut. So I just think it's important that people keep that in mind. It's great for all of us to say we're going to increase, your dollar's going to go more because we're going to pay you a fair minimum wage. But in reality, that's not what happens. Look what happened to McDonald's. They just put a robot in to do the work. So think about that before you make your decision. And it's just something that I thought was important that the committee hear. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Case, and are there, for the second.